WFH with two guys. Now here's Benny and Dennis.
The idea of starting our business is typically just an overwhelming process in general. But if we're fortunate enough to have some of the financial successes that we expect and hope to happen, that can actually be another burden for us, Dennis. That's something that we didn't even think about when we started our businesses.
No, you find out, especially talking to Greg Luken today, that it's really, you got two things you're running. You're running your business as well as you're managing your wealth. And there's a lot to it. And I thought I learned a lot in this conversation, and it was just, it's a great podcast to listen to.
Yeah. The ability to just really not only earn your money, but also to be able to keep it and for it to affect your children and your grandchildren. This is something that we really don't put a whole lot of thought into, I think, sometimes. So take a listen to this one. Greg Luken is the president of Luken Wealth Management, and he's also the author of Unleash Your Financial Superpowers. This is a really important one to listen to, especially for those of us who really want to achieve the goal and keep the goal that we have. Let's take a listen. One of the great focuses and goals I know for a lot of people when they're starting their business, Dennis, is the idea of being able to be financially free and not having to worry about working for a boss and the independence and some of the things that we dream of. And for some of us that actually can happen. But there's a lot of pitfalls when it comes to actually achieving some of that financial success.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those ones where depends on in your timing. You got to think where you're at with it, and also is it wealth? Also, a lot of times people are looking for quality of life, and so how do you find that work-life balance and that experience? And do you want to be in corporate America? Do you want to be an entrepreneurial background and focus? And so there's just lots that go on, and then you throw in all the outside world influences. You can think you're doing really well, and then all of a sudden the world changes on you if you're not thinking ahead. So I think there's lots to think. Everyone wants to be wealthy, but there's things you can do to get there, and then there's things you can do to protect and make sure you're heading in the right direction.
So as usual, we've got an expert in the house today. We want to talk to somebody who really knows this stuff. So Greg, thank you for coming on today's show.
Benny, Dennis, thank you for having me. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you, right?
This is something that I don't think people think of as really a problem, but the idea at some point, if you're successful, you plug along, you've done some, hard work and maybe a little bit of luck in there too as well, you achieve the American dream, the ability to be financially independent, have that dream income, dream chunk of money there. That happens. And it's not as simple as just getting the money and that's the end of the story. And then you live happily after ever, is it? There's a lot beyond that, Greg, isn't it?
There's a lot beyond that. Making it is one thing. Keeping it and enjoying it is really a completely different thing. Benny, there are about 170,000 new millionaires in this country each year.
Oh, wow, that's a lot.
It is a lot.
That's amazing.
It is a lot, and of course, it varies by year, the economy. But the last decade, that's what it's been running. But the sad truth is that 10 years later, about 3 out of 10, almost 1 out of 3, are not still millionaires. It's one thing to make it, but it's really something different to keep it. And if you look at people who inherit the money or people who got it early in life, the persistence of keeping it is even lower. We see those persistency rates of 40% and lower.
So as that parent that says, you can't have my money until I get old, I'm actually doing my kids a favor.
You're actually doing them a favor, right? So that's the whole thing about first generation wealth is when you've earned it, there are mindsets, there are strategies, there are behaviors that go along with what helped you get it.
Right. If you look at organizations, I actually had gone to work for a company in Houston back in the late 90s. It was Imperial Sugar, that it was a family-run business. it was the third generation, and they went bankrupt. And what happened, I said, that first generation, they worked hard, sweat, tears. They started with nothing and they built it up. The second generation saw mom and dad doing the sweat and tears and understood that they still had to work hard. The third generation, they get there, mom and dad, they're wealthy. They just assume the money's going to keep coming in, and then they start doing stupid things. And I think I've always looked at companies after that to see, especially if they're family owned, are they first, second, third, or more generations? And the further they get down that line, the greater probability I think that they have for challenges if they don't have the right people come in the organization to help guide them to avoid some of those pitfalls.
Absolutely. Dennis, I don't know exactly what the statistic is, but I want to say it's around 30% of wealth, less than 30% of wealth extends beyond the third generation. In other words, it's made that first generation, the second and the third, by the time they get there, 70% families have
wasted away or bought stupid stuff and enjoyed it, but didn't make anything out of it. And I mean, the key is that you're enjoying life, but you're also trying to get that money to work for you, I would assume, so that it doesn't just float away is the challenge.
It is. And there's a distinction, if you want to make it, between being rich and being wealthy, right? Wealth is really that store of riches. You've got the silos, you've got the warehouses where you keep the goose that will keep laying the golden eggs. And the problem is that second and third generation, unless they adopt the correct mindsets, attitudes, and behaviors, they are cooking the goose that lays the golden eggs and eating it.
That's a great analogy. So all of a sudden the eggs quit coming.
The eggs quit coming. Yeah.
Huh. And then you go to the grocery store now and pay $8 for a dozen eggs.
Yeah. Take out a HELOC
to get your fried eggs there.
That's right.
Hey, well, let me. You kind of brought up something in there I was thinking about from say I'm in my business today, and how do I, one of the nice things about having my business and being able to kind of make the decisions on my own is that I can do things that are on my own. And I used to work for some of the biggest companies in the world, in my former life. And I know that their ability to do things, they can open up a new division within a company and really put millions of dollars, if not more, into a specific division. We can't do that as small business owners. Are there some things that you advise some of your clients with regards to, like, when you're working in your business and how you design it and structure it and fortify it, if you will? I'm not sure if it makes sense, but I don't know if you. Sure. I was just kind of thinking about that.
Yeah, that's a great point, Benny. I mean, one of the advantages of being a solopreneur or an entrepreneur with a small business is you have flexibility in some things that large businesses don't have, and having a great tax team on your team is, or a tax division on your team is a really key component, because taxes are always your biggest expense. But being a solopreneur or an entrepreneur of a small, mid-sized business, one of the things we found is really helpful is to make sure that the business is built around the life the person wants to have. That's the great thing about a small business, is you can adapt or adjust that business to the lifestyle that you want to have. And one of the things that we've seen people be continually successful at, and one of those patterns of success, is making sure that they are, you can call it paying yourself first, or that they are extracting money from the business rather than investing everything back in the business. And that mentality of making sure that the business is profitable and that the profits are stored outside of the business, so you're not relying solely on an exit to give you that payday to produce that goose. And tax wise, there are things, with solopreneur can put away around they can shelter $350,000 a year from taxes. and the business has to be cash flowing that so that you can live your life and have enough to meet your expenses. But there's a lot of flexibility in the tax code.
And taxes are always that challenge that small businesses sometimes forget about.
Absolutely.
I mean, I know when I first started out, you're thinking about it, but you're not, you're putting some money aside, and then all of a sudden that tax bill comes, like, oh shit. It's like, and,
right.
And to your point, you've got to have that really good tax accountant that helps you plan and think ahead, because Uncle Sam's going to get his money no matter what. And so, you can sit there and think you're making all this money, but in reality, you got to send some to Washington, D.C. or the state of Tennessee or whatever state you're in.
That's true. And I think it's helpful to think of the IRC, the Internal Revenue Code, as it is the rule book. It is the code book. It is. Right. It's not that there are loopholes. It's that these are the rules. And so you have to know the rules to effectively play the game. And so having that, as you said, having that good tax counsel on your team is key.
I know in my industry, there was, I think it was 6 years ago, one of our tax partners said, hey, there's an R&D tax credit that's focused on small businesses. And we were able to go through that exercise, and it was amazing how much money we saved in taxes by going through this process. And then we were also able to help pass some of those cost savings on to our customers, because before we were having to charge a higher price. Now I can charge a little bit lower price. I make more money and my customer gets a better product, and Uncle Sam doesn't get as much money because of some tax code that was out there that nobody even really knew about.
Yes.
And that's, I think, to your point, it's having those, even if you're a small business, having those relationships with the right attorneys, the right tax people, the right wealth management people. It's worth the support to have those conversations and make sure you got them. They may not be full-time on your team, but they're on your team helping you figure out how to navigate this craziness that we all kind of have to navigate through.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Greg, I know that you've done this for quite some time. And along with that, no one ever plans on making missteps or failing in life, right? People, if you're running a successful business, I think I've seen this happen with some of my peers. They believe they're truly invincible and they don't make mistakes, or they can, Shaquille O'Neal, I don't know if you know this story or not, guys, but like Shaquille O'Neal, when he was a young 20-something-year-old out of LSU, he went out and he like literally spent his entire first paycheck, which was a $1 million paycheck or something like that. It really put him in a bad situation. But hey, Shaquille O'Neal, it's worth hundreds of millions of dollars. He was going to be getting more money. It was no big deal. But for like an individual who maybe has made that first $1 million, and maybe they could or could not make that second $1 million, do you have any stories or maybe anything that you can kind of relate? Because I can think of little bits of stories that I've heard over the years. But what are some things that people don't plan for, or maybe that you've seen that successful people kind of end up in a bad situation?
Well, there was someone we worked with back in the 90s, and from the 80s forward was making a 7-figure a year income. And the thing of it was, the family didn't drive Lamborghinis. They drove, Jeep Wrangler, and this was someone in the music industry wore T-shirts. It wasn't going on expensive clothes or expensive cars or even real estate that was that extensive. It was like sand through their fingers, and I remember distinctly one time getting this panic call in the early 1990s. This gentleman who was making over $1 million a year back when that was just huge.
Huge. That was
huge money. And calling saying, I have a quarterly tax payment of $54,000, and we don't have the money. I'm going to have to go talk to the bank. And I remember thinking how sad that was, that there's all this stress around writing a check. And so ultimately we ended up disengaging, and I ran into one of his children actually over the Christmas holidays, and asked how they were doing and if they still lived in a certain place in Tennessee. And no, they sold that place and they downsized, and he's got a job working for somebody else now. And so he's making an ordinary income. And the thing of it is, it's just like those, we can talk about those sports stories, and you see the lottery winners that, they win this big lottery and 7 years later they're filing bankruptcy. It's because they need to recognize the patterns of success. There are very predictable patterns of success. And it's
so Greg, talk about what are some of those patterns for the listener.
I wrote a book and I call them 3 superpowers, but it's really those 3 powers. And just kind of the overview is getting clarity around purpose. Purpose is that North Star. It's the key to unlocking everything else. And if you think about running a successful business, it's about, what is your why? What is that? What are those values? What is that thing that's going to draw me to it, be my North Star? So it's getting that clear power of purpose. Number 2 is the power of plan. So having a step-by-step concrete plan of action, and that a good plan eliminates the energy drain of having to think about every decision, right? So just like if you go to the gym without a plan, you're going to cop out in the middle of that set of push-ups, right? But if you have that, here are the 5 exercises, I'm doing 3 rounds, 10 reps of each, then you just bang through it. But having that game plan so that here is exactly what I'm going to do. If A happens, then this. If B happens, I do that. And the third thing is the power of consistent execution. And having that clarity about why I'm doing something, here is what I need to do, and then having typically the relationships, right? The tax people, the wealth management people, the legal people to say, no, here's what you need to do to button this up so that you have good, consistent execution. It's just like running a great small business.
Right. And this applies to if you're starting out young as well as you get older.
Absolutely.
I mean, the younger you are, and you can start with this idea, you may not be a millionaire, but it's going to help you get there because that plan helps you navigate there if that's important to you.
Absolutely.
And I think most people, maybe being a millionaire, maybe not be their top, some may not be, but it's having that wealth, which is also quality of life. It's like, because I could be making $80,000 a year and be happy as long as I've got that quality of life that I have based on my plan. But if my plan is that I want to own a house that's 10,000 square feet, then that 80,000 is probably not ever going to help me get to that ultimate goal. So it's having that all pulled together.
Yes,
it makes sense.
I had dinner with a young entrepreneur late last year, and I was asking him some questions, trying to clarify that power of purpose for him, and all we could get to was, hey, what do you really want? Well, I have to be able to sell my company for at least $100 million because I need a PJ. I need a private jet. And I said, okay, so let's fast forward and say you're there and you have a private jet. What now? He said, then I want 2. And there's nothing wrong with wanting that, but we couldn't get to a why. And so sometimes there is an itch that needs to be scratched. And I'm not sure money can always scratch that. And so clarifying that power of purpose helps you get to what really is the thing.
Right. I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much more than just the money. And it's funny, I think of myself and my wife, who's been with me through, good and bad times. She's, bless her heart. I mean, believe me, she's been amazing. But she actually pointed out how the things that were super important to me in my 20s are no longer important to me in my 50s, right? And she's seen that. And I remember having a conversation with a recent graduate from college, and he was talking to me, and talking about getting a Ferrari, and I'm like, "Wow, you are so young."
Right.
But yeah. So yeah,
but that's one of the things, particularly with first generation wealthy. There are these things that beset us, and FOMO, the fear of missing out, and how do we signal socially? What's the jewelry that we wear? Do we need a tag watch or a Patek Philippe, and or what vacations or what real estate or which Ferrari, right? And so that fear of missing out, the imposter syndrome shows up so much with first generation wealthy, and that has an impact on how we make decisions and our money origin story. What were those early influences, and that fear of messing up? I've gotten to this point in my career, and I'm pretty sure I'm messing up on something. I just don't know what it is yet. And so a lot of these things have
And
an
I
impact.
think that, because Greg and I are both in Brentwood, Tennessee, which if you drive around Brentwood, there's a lot of big houses.
huge houses.
Huge houses.
There's a couple of them.
There's a couple. And it's amazing how some have beautiful homes, but then you go inside the home and there's just nothing there.
No furniture.
But then there's other people that live in very modest homes. You don't even know that they're wealthy, and that they're probably the more wealthy and happier people, because they've found that balance of what is really important to them, and they've got their why, and they're heavily involved in the community and giving back. But it's not always about building that big mansion and having that, but then having nothing inside. And so I think it's important individually as well as your company to pull together and go through those 3 points that Greg made. I mean, that applies to just operating your business, but also managing yourself and giving you that wealth that you're trying to get to. And I think this is great.
Absolutely. And Dennis, to your point, it really is like running another business. Running your wealth is like running your business. What are those values? What is your mission? What are your objectives, your goals? What are the benchmarks you're going to use to measure success? And to that point, we even encourage people to create their own index. So you're not dealing with keeping up with the Joneses. You're not dealing with keeping up with the Dow Joneses. You are, here is the Dennis index, and here is the Benny index, and how am I doing compared to where I want to be?
Greg, people get here, but then there's always challenges or villains that can sidetrack what you're trying to get to. What are some examples of some of those things that, if I'm wealthy, that I might want to watch out for, that you would like to share with the listeners?
Sure. So we've identified 7 deadly financial villains that show up very predictably to get people off track. One of them that seems to be showing up a lot right now is we refer to her as fin porn. That's short for financial pornography. And she shows up with financially explicit charts, graphs, videos, news to elicit financial arousal. She's one of the most attractive and polished of all the villains, and one of the hardest to defeat. And so what happens is she perverts this desire we have for certainty, this desire for a crystal ball. And so that perversion of a very natural human desire can get us sidetracked on things that don't really matter. Another example is what we call the lever denier. And, the lever denier shows up at cocktail parties and on social media and tries to get you to believe that it's not just 4 levers you can pull, but there are only 4 financial levers you can pull. The good news is that's enough. But he tries to get you to believe that those aren't the keys. All you can control is how much you invest, how long you invest, how you invest, and how much you spend. There is no other lever to pull, but those 4 levers are enough. And of course, the evil clock is one of the other most insidious. Father Time waits for no one, but his son, the evil clock, shows up and tries to convince you that you have plenty of time. And the way he steals your wealth is to convince you don't need to do anything.
Interesting. Those are good ones. And I'm sure in your book, you talk about all the other ones. So as people get your book, they can dig in and learn more about that.
Yes.
So Greg, this has been a wonderful talk, and I really appreciate you sharing some of your wisdom and some insight. I've taken a bunch of notes, and I think this is great. But I know people are going to have questions for you specifically, and they might want to, have some personal things that they need to discuss with you. What would be the best way for them to get a hold of you?
The best way is through our website, which is luken.pro. It's Luken, like the gospel according to Luke, with an N on the end, .pro. And there's contact through that. If they mention the podcast, this podcast, episode 140, they'll get a free 20-minute consultation.
Wow.
And then the book, Unleash Your Financial Superpowers, is available at their favorite bookseller.
And Greg, is that so you can buy? Is it on? Can you audio listen to it yet, or is it just a hard copy right now on your book?
It's a hard copy and Kindle.
Okay.
So it's available Kindle and Barnes and Noble, Amazon, all those
great places you can get books. So it's a good one. I encourage you guys, especially to talk about wealth, learn about more of those other villains that are out there that we all face.
Absolutely.
That it's important to know those and have a plan around those. So Greg, thanks for joining. We really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Same here, gentlemen. Really, really appreciate it. Benny, Dennis, great talking with you, and look forward to listening to more of your podcasts. Appreciate you all doing this.
Absolutely. Greg, thanks so much for stopping by. Greg Luken with Luken Wealth Management and the author of Unleash Your Financial Superpowers. Make sure to give him a ring. Thanks so much for stopping by today. We appreciate it, Greg.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Well, Dennis, that's another podcast in the can. I know that a lot of you all want to know how to get in touch with us. Dennis, what's the best way for folks to be able to get a hold of you?
Yeah, email's by far the best for me. It's Dennis J, so DENNISJ @worksolution.com, and that's WORX solution, no S at the end, so solution.com. Benny, how about you?
Yeah, same thing. Get a hold of me. My email address is benny@velocitytechnology.group. That's BENNY @velocitytechnology.group. Also, for me and Dennis, you can find us on LinkedIn. Look for us on LinkedIn. Our Work From Home with Two Guys is on LinkedIn. And we also have a website, WFH2guys.com. Look us up. You'll find all the past episodes and some little bits of information that maybe we don't get a chance to talk to on the podcast. We put it out there too as well.
And definitely share us with your friends and people in your network.
Absolutely. Let us know what we can do to make this podcast your podcast. Give us some ideas. And if you'd like to be a guest, let us know. We'll talk to you guys soon.
You've been listening to WFH with Two Guys. We'll see you next time.